our first episode of Brain Food, a new science series where in each episode I talk about cool science subjects and then leave you guys to think about it. And for our first episode, I thought we'd talk about paradoxes, what they are, some famous examples of one, and what you need to know about them. And also, I would like to make a small announcement. This is the first video where I'm doing the video with a 4K Ultra HD camera. I would like to thank my father for paying for the camera and all the equipment. It cost $70. And thank you, Amazon Prime. You're totally worth $100 a year for free 2-day shipping on this item. Alright, so let's get to it. A paradox is defined in the dictionary as a logical sounding statement, but when you actually consider the implications of it, it turns out to be completely impossible. So first, we're going to talk about some famous paradoxes, and yeah, so here we go. Alright, so you've probably heard of several paradoxes, but you probably don't realize they're paradoxes. Paradoxes most often pop up when talking about time travel and the consequences of it. So here we go. Alright, the first paradox we're going to talk about is called the grandfather paradox. So let's say that somehow you gain the ability to travel back in time. Whoa, mind-blowing! But you're going to use it for something not so great as actually gaining the ability to time travel. You're going back in time to kill your grandpa. Since obviously we don't want this to be a older channel meant for older audiences, and we want this to reach all people, let's just say you want to go back because your grandfather never gave you any presents at Christmas. So, So you go back in time to when your grandfather was about your age. So here is the grandpa. Now you go back in time and you kill him. Boom. Finito. Here, let's just put his hat on his tombstone. It was his favorite hat. However, if your father never went back, if your grandpa is dead, that means your father never gave birth to you, which means that you in turn would be dead as well. Which means you never existed and you never went back in time to kill your grandpa. Which means that you're just going to go back in time and kill him again. So it's sort of a loop. This is the grandfather paradox, and it's a very famous one. And it's often brought up when talking about the aspects of time travel and the effects going back into the past could have on the future. I, for one, if I ever invent time travel, I'm going to go into the future so I can avoid all these things. But anyway, here we go. So, another paradox is the spear and the shield paradox. Or you might have heard it before as the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. So here we're going to say that there's a spear that can pierce any weapon, or that can pierce any shield or hide on Earth. And then we'll say that there's a shield that can block any weapon and shield its owners from all harm. So a merchant is selling these things by the road, and a traveler comes by and he asks, what would happen if someone was trying to pierce the shield using the spear? The merchant couldn't answer, because if these objects were to exist and they were to meet, it would be impossible for either thing to block or cancel out or affect either object. In fact, only one of these objects could exist in that world at a single time, meaning that if they both existed, they would just sort of cancel each other out. There would be a shield that the spear could not pierce, and there would be a shield and the shield would have only the spear that could pierce it. So now, one more time, so now we're going to talk about another paradox called the bootstrap paradox, or the casual, no, whatever, it's the bootstrap paradox. So let's say a person in a bookstore with a time machine goes into the bookstore and buys a copy of Hamlet, one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, if not his most famous other than Romeo and Juliet. And he goes back in time and gives it to Shakespeare in Victorian London. Now Shakespeare publishes Hamlet as his own work. Hamlet is obviously one of the most famous plays in the world, so it gets reprinted countless times and is distributed all over the world until eventually Hamlet ends up in the same bookstore that the person with the time machine originally bought it. Who then wrote Hamlet? Was it Shakespeare? Was it the guy, technically? So yeah. A good example of this appears in the short animated film World of Tomorrow. By the way, if you haven't seen that short, it's like 17 minutes. It's on Netflix. Go watch it. It's amazing science fiction. I like to watch it whenever I'm bored. It gives you a lot to think about. So, let's say, in the movie, towards the end, spoiler alert for World of Tomorrow, if you don't want the ending to get spoiled, go to Netflix now if you have it and watch it, or maybe find it. I'm pretty sure it's available on YouTube for free. So anyway, towards the end of the movie is about a clone who goes back in time to the person she was originally cloned from, and she brings the person she was cloned from in 227 years into the future to view what humanity is like now. So, towards the end of the movie, she gives the girl a quote. So let's see. That's pretty much what she looks like. She gives the past version of herself a quote. However, the only reason that the clone knows the quote because she remembers hearing the quote from the cloned person. By the way, in the movie, the clones inherit the memories of the person they were originally cloned from. Plus, since this is technically the original person's grandkid, she also has the memories of the person who came before and then this person. However, since she only remembers the quote from hearing it from this person, we have no idea where the original quote came from. Alright. So, one more paradox. It is called the liar's paradox, or a more famous. Well, liar's paradox is actually a pretty broad term. It refers to multiple paradoxes, but the liar's paradox we're going to talk about today is the card paradox. Okay, so we have a postcard with a side A and a side B. We have side A has the statement that side B is true. Whatever statement is on side B has to be true. But what side B says is that side A is false. So, here we have two statements that directly contradict each other. If side B is true, then side A has to be false. But if side A is false, that means B isn't true, which means side B could be lying, and side A could be true, but that pretty much loops it back. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, forever and ever. You could argue you could go on for eternity about why either side is right or correct. But really, it's pretty much just impossible to determine how the card paradox works. So yeah, that's the first episode of Brain Food. This series is meant to give you things to think about. If you want to go learn more about famous paradoxes or